Okay, attention everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. I need my gavel. I didn't bring my gavel.
Thank you for the lesson.
I have a gavel, I didn't bring it. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
But just start the meeting.
It's 7:03 PM, and I'm calling the February 22nd, 2024 Planning Board meeting to order. I'm going to call roll as a first step in our meeting process. So, members of the Planning Board, when I call your name, would you please indicate that you're present? Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, present.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, present.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist present.
Beth Herr,
Beth Herr, present.
Rick Mitchell,
Here.
and Marnie Crouch present. And I note for the record that Pat Norton and Matt Hamill are absent. They have children, and they're involved with their kids because it's school vacation week. So if people would bear with me, I am going to take the A&R request for 25 Gardner Street out of order because I think it will take just 10 minutes or so. So I do have to read the notice that's pertinent to this A&R request. So in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81, the applicant, Jeffrey Alsop, 587 Bay Road, Hamilton, who is, I think, a representative of the owner of 25 Gardner Street Nominee Trust of Hamilton, Mass., is seeking a Form A approval not required endorsement from the Planning Board for multiple parcels at 250 Cutler Road, Assessors Map 24, lots 26 and 34. The existing 57 plus or minus acre property is to be divided. The collective property is located within the R1B zoning district. So, Mr. Alsop, if you could step to the microphone and explain what the applicant is seeking through this A&R request.
Yes. So we are here with a PB A&R plan to be endorsed. And I've been asked to provide a narrative of my intentions for the property. I do have it under agreement and plan on closing shortly. The property is at 25 Gardner, and I certainly welcome providing all this information. First, just a little introduction to myself and family. I want to point out that we've lived and worked in Hamilton, having moved here in 1988, so I've been around a while. My wife and Kim and I raised children here. Our daughter and her husband returned to Hamilton and are raising 2 of their boys here, and my son and his wife are raising his family 1 town over in Essex. But I'm blessed that he works with me daily next door. We're the stewards of the post office and have restored the original building. Our offices are upstairs. We're always available and willing to openly discuss our projects. In fact, a Gardner Street neighbor came by when we were doing the ZBA hearing and asked what our plans were, and she left fully informed and actually pleased with what she saw. How we have gotten here, 25 Gardner is a property of approximately 63 acres. We found close to 5 more during the survey work that we performed. It is non-conforming presently because it has 3 residences on it. So the entire property is, and this is a very critical issue or concern, the entire property is subject to a conservation restriction that leaves 2 building envelopes, one approximately 5 acres, which presently has the main house and the pool house and stable. The other, at the corner of Moulton Street, Bay Road, and Gardner, has 2 dwellings, a barn and a garage. There's no prohibition in the CR to dividing the property, and that's pretty critical. So roughly 57 acres of the property are under the CR, and that prohibits any additional buildings. Construction is only allowed on the building envelopes. The property is also subject to an ECTA trail that loops from Gardner Street to Moulton Street. The property, sort of into my intentions, the property languished on the market for well over a year. The buildings are in a state of decay. The grounds, while gorgeous, are immense. The maintenance costs are prohibitively expensive, and there were no offers. The concept to divide the property into 5 parcels represents a solution to this situation, makes the elements more affordable, more manageable, and therefore more marketable. So the original concept was to create 5 conforming Form A lots, and that proposal necessitated the demolition of all the structures existing on the building envelope 1 at the corner. We had a great series of meetings with the Hamilton Historic District Commission, and they expressed that they would really like to see the building saved. So at that point, I reconfigured the lots to save the buildings, at least 2 of them, the gray building and the barn. And so we went through that process and reconfigured the lot lines, and therefore had to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals because now there are 2 non-conforming lots at the corner. So we did that, and we got a decision in favor. And so there are going to hopefully be, we'll sign this, maybe not tonight because we don't have all the sheets here. There'd be a single-family lot for sale on Moulton, a Lot B with 2 family house and barn, and then Lot C is a 9-acre lot with approximately 2.5 acres buildable, and that's by dividing building envelope 2, and that would be for sale. And then approximately a 20-acre lot with a house and barn, the main house, 2.5 acres buildable, and that would be for sale as well. And then approximately Lot E, which is an unbuildable lot, 34 acres, will be retained by myself. So the sort of overall global view is that my daughter and her husband own 139 Gardner. I own a parcel called 0 Gardner, very auspicious, and that is abutting Lot E. So I'm looking to create a larger parcel and perhaps go into farming in my old age. So that's.
Well, we always like to see
Yes.
equestrian uses for property here in Hamilton, and certainly I think Mrs. Sears had horses there for a really long time.
Yeah.
So it would be wonderful if some aspect of that use could remain. I open it up to any questions from board members for Mr. Alsop. Hearing none, I think I will entertain a motion from the board to approve the A&R request filed by Mr. Alsop.
So moved.
Seconded?
So when I call your name, would you please indicate that you approve? Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. And I apologize for the mix-up and the absence of the Mylar. I will ask planning board members to go to Mary Ellen's office and sign the Mylar at their earliest convenience, and I will, as soon as I am able tomorrow, send her an email to expect you. And do you all know where her office is?
Just ask that. I don't.
It's,
Is it in Patton?
Patton Homestead?
no, it's not.
Here?
No. It's actually behind the Council on Aging building. There's a little red building behind the Council on Aging, and there's a set of kind of rickety steps, and there's a door that says staff only. And if you go in there, Barry Ellen has a very nice office, actually, and
And you can go through, too. You can go through the Council of Aging.
You can go through the Council on Aging. So she has all the maps that you would ever want to see, and the most amazing printing machine I've seen in a room, I think ever, an enormous printing machine. So she can print all these huge maps that are much easier to read than the little copies that we sometimes get. So I will try and arrange that and send around emails so that you can get your requisite signatures as soon as possible.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Appreciate it.
So the next item on our agenda is a continued hearing on the applications of the Hamilton-Wenham Regional School District for a site plan review and a stormwater management permit. In Patrick's absence, in an exercise of caution, I will read the notice. He could advise me whether it was necessary because it's a continued hearing. So due to my uncertainty on this regard, I think I'll read it. So this is, the Hamilton Planning Board will continue their review of a site plan application and a stormwater management application for a project proposed at 775 Bay Road by the Hamilton-Wenham Regional High School. The applicant is Superintendent Eric Tracy and represented by consultant Kathleen Hervel, Director of Athletics, Gale Associates, Inc. The site plan review shall be as per the Hamilton zoning bylaw and state regulations, in addition to the Hamilton Stormwater Management Bylaw, Article 29, as recently amended, and, well, it's no longer under review by the Mass Attorney General. It's now in effect. The subject property is located at the rear of 775 Bay Road and is also known as a separate Assessor's Map 40, Lot Number 11, and Map 41, Lot Number 1. The proposed plan is to add small structures and facilities related to the athletic facility and artificial turf fields, artificial track turfs, tennis courts, lighting, grandstands, press box, amenities building, and ADA access improvements. Plan and reports are available electronically or can be viewed at the Planning Office, Patton Homestead, 650 Asbury Street, Hamilton, Mass. 01982. All wishing to speak on the matter should attend the hearing either in person or electronically via Zoom. So with that said, is Mr. Houston available on Zoom? And I believe Ms. Hervel was also going to appear
Yeah,
via
she's there.
Zoom this evening. So, Mr. Houston, if you could start the ball rolling, what I'd like, well, actually, I apologize. Before I turn to Mr. Houston, for the benefit of some of the people that are here tonight who may not be aware of the process, I wanted to just go ahead and review the timeline, because I think there's some misconception that this process is dragging on and the fault lies with the planning board, when I would respectfully disagree. So the funding for the athletic fields project was approved at town meeting on April 1st, 2023. But Gale Associates did not file its site plan review application and stormwater management permit application until November 16th, 2023. And I note that the vote to fund the athletic campus redevelopment was not the equivalent of approval of a site plan review application or a stormwater management permit application. With respect to the site plan review application, pursuant to Mass General Law 40A, Section 11, there has to be a 14-day notice for the hearing. So that would have delayed the actual hearing until sometime in December. We had a hearing scheduled on December 19th on this project, but the peer reviewer was not approved until one day later. And the plans for this project are exceedingly complex, and the package of materials that were submitted were, I think, well over 250 pages. And I didn't bring the maps that I have, but I have a huge roll of maps. So the engineering aspects of this project far exceed the expertise of the planning board to evaluate in any reasonable fashion, and therefore a peer reviewer, and that is Mr. Thomas Houston of Professional Services, had to be engaged. And so that happened on December 20th, 2023. So Mr. Houston filed his first report with respect to the site plan review application on January 8th, 2024, and noted 44 items with respect to the site plan review application that required correction or clarification. Gale Associates responded to those comments on February 8th, and Mr. Houston followed up with that, and on February 6th, at our planning board meeting, he reported that most of the items had been resolved. On January 23rd, Mr. Houston submitted 43 comments with respect to the stormwater management permit application, and Gale Associates responded again with a 247-page document on February 13th, 2024. In addition, an abutter, Ms. Angelo, filed comments on February 9th, 2024, and both Gale Associates and Mr. Houston have addressed her comments and concerns. So, in addition, I'll note on February 12th, the superintendent of schools submitted a proposed schedule pursuant to which the Hamilton Wenham School District would utilize the lights and the PA system until 8:30 p.m. on Sunday through Thursday and until 9 p.m. on Fridays through Sunday. There was no indication that the number of days for that schedule would be less than 365. On February 20th, then, Mr. Houston submitted a 14-page document in response to Gale Associates and a 13-page document in response to Angelo's comments. So, in addition, on February 20th, Gale Associates submitted written responses. So here we are. This is a complicated process, and it's ongoing, and the planning board is doing its very best to review all the materials that are submitted and listen to our peer reviewer as to how to proceed. So now I will turn to Mr. Houston, and I would ask him to review where we are in this process, and in particular address any outstanding issues from his perspective. And then, of course, Ms. Hervel will have a chance to address the planning board as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can go through this verbally. If you wanted me to share the screen, I can, but it's not critical. With respect to the 43 comments that we had with respect to stormwater, Gale Associates was highly responsive, and I believe all but a very few of those have been completely resolved. So let me just touch maybe the three things that are kind of critical in the whole process. The first is our comment number 1. We had asked for 5 test pits in the softball field because there is no test information available there that serves as the basis for the synthetic turf field which infiltrates stormwater. So Gale Associates' proposal is to perform that testing prior to construction. That's obviously most critical, that it be done before construction. Some boards prefer it to be done during the approval process, but deferring it as long as it's done prior to construction, that's the critical thing. So in our report, we included a recommended condition of approval of any favorable decision, which would be prior to construction that they excavate the 5 test pits, and we went into a bit of detail as to the technical requirements for doing that. Our comment number 2 was very similar. We had requested 2 test pits that will serve as the basis for design of the infiltration trench that will drain the tennis courts. So the same process would apply there. Gale Associates proposes to defer those tests until prior to construction. And again, that's the most critical. We included some technical requirements for doing that. The only downside of deferring it is that there may have to be design revisions sort of during construction if the test pits don't show what we anticipate they'll show, which is fairly deep groundwater and fairly permeable soil. I can say that the soils that have been tested are pretty consistent. There's no reason to believe the soil in either of these locations would be different. But at any rate, that's the current proposal, is simply to defer the testing until prior to construction. So the other thing I wanted to mention, this is just ongoing discussion, and this is, I believe, our comment number 42, sort of at the end of the report. This was on our original comment, which is that we requested that Gale Associates engage a person with specialized expertise to assist in specifying the appropriate requirements for the synthetic turf. So Gale Associates, in their response, said that they are requiring pre-installation testing, that the testing would be in compliance with current standards. So I believe they are referring to drinking water standards, because they're the only standards that I am aware of that apply to PFAS. And there are probably 2 standards that we should talk about. One of them is the current Mass DEP standard for PFAS in drinking water, which is 20 nanograms per liter, or that is 20 parts per trillion. So it's a very tiny value. There is a proposal by US EPA to set the standard at 4 nanograms per liter, not 20. And my understanding is that the 4 nanograms per liter was set because it's the minimum detection limit. They can't test more finely than that. So my understanding of Gale's proposal is that they propose to set the standard of acceptability at the 20 nanograms per liter. If the board wanted to discuss the issue of 4 nanograms per liter, you could. I also included, and I know the board members probably know this, but other people may not, there are requirements from the Conservation Commission in regard to their conservation bylaw Chapter 17 permit, where they are also requiring testing of various PFAS compounds prior to construction, and they're also requiring sampling of the Miles River up gradient from where this flow would enter at the point where it enters, and then down gradient where it enters the Miles River swamp. So there is testing otherwise required. Gale Associates is proposing it as part of their construction documents, And there's also testing of PFAS compounds that is required by the Conservation Commission under their stormwater permit. The other document that we had submitted, the board had asked us to address a number of kind of outstanding issues or issues that hadn't been responded to. So we did issue a memorandum on February 20th, sort of addressing the outstanding issues. One of them, we'd been asked to provide some guidance on noise. And with respect to noise, we believe that the noise from the athletic fields and the noise from the public address system can best be addressed by limiting the hours of use. And as the chair mentioned, the school department's current proposal is to shut off the lights and the public address system at 8:30 on Sunday night and on weeknights, and to shut them off at 9:30 on Friday and Saturday nights. So clearly, the school department needs to keep the lights on to make their athletic program work. Clearly, the neighbors, I'm sure, would prefer it if the lights go off as early as possible. So the school department's current proposal is 8:30 and 9:30, but we did suggest maybe the board might want to discuss that issue with the school department and see if there's any flexibility in terms of the hours for lights and the hours for the public address system. The other issue with respect to noise is whether or not a noise barrier would be helpful in reducing noise for the abutters. Well, a noise barrier fundamentally works if you block the line of sight between the source of the noise and the receptor. And the sensitive receptor is usually a residence, and it is in these cases. So the tennis courts, which I understand may also be used for pickleball, they're fairly far from the residences. They're 300 feet away, but if a noise barrier is considered there, there are fabric types of noise barriers that could be just hung on the fencing of the tennis courts, and that would effectively shield the residences from that noise. It's more difficult with the football multi-use field and the associated grandstand, because a noise barrier that would block the field and the grandstand would be more of a significant structural issue. It would be a substantial structure and fairly expensive to construct. The idea, again, would be to block the line of sight between the football field, the bleachers, and the adjacent residences. So those are just our thoughts on noise. We wanted to also respond, and I know Gale Associates also responded to these. We responded to the issues raised by the Ipswich River Watershed Association in two sets of comments that they submitted. The first comment was they suggested that a bond be posted to make sure that the fields are maintained. Our comment was that a bond is an instrument usually used for a one-time expense. So I think the way to handle that, and I know Gale Associates is working with the school district to develop a maintenance budget for these facilities. My suggestion would be that the maintenance be included as a planning board condition of approval for any favorable decision, so that there'd be a mechanism of enforcement to make sure that the maintenance is continuously carried out, because it would be a condition of approval. The Watershed Association's second comment, they suggested that there be backup systems to the underground infiltration, which occurs underneath the synthetic turf fields, making the comment that underground facilities fail frequently. Well, that is generally true, but the reason that they fail is that they have total suspended solids or particulates that start choking up the stone layers in facilities. Well, that's not going to happen here for a few reasons. First of all, to get into the stone layer, the runoff has to pass through the artificial turf, which sort of filters it. But secondly, the sources of suspended solids are typically automobile traffic and runoff from landscaped areas. Well, these fields don't have any automobile traffic, and there's actually a raised curb around them which prevents any runoff from any landscaped areas. So there's not going to be really TSS getting into these fields, so we don't feel there's really the requirement to have a redundant backup system for them. I think these should continue to operate well. Their third comment was sort of a follow-on in the same area. And again, we feel that the permeability of the synthetic turf is not going to be prone to degradation by TSS because they can't get on the fields. Okay. Okay, this is more the general contractor will conduct third-party testing. The required testing we specified in the construction documents, but Gale Associates again mentioned this would be in accordance with current standards, and we've discussed whether what the current standards are, maybe something to further discuss, whether it's the 20 or the 4 nanograms per liter as the standard of acceptability. The fifth comment was that a party other than the school department be responsible for the operation and maintenance of the stormwater facilities. Well, our suggestion there was simply that the planning board discuss with the school district what are their plans, who do they plan to select to do the maintenance of the stormwater facilities. Is it an in-house function, or do they plan to engage one of the many firms that do that professionally? The sixth comment, again, relates to testing requirements. And again, we pointed out pursuant to the conservation bylaw permit that the Conservation Commission is requiring testing for various PFAS components. And their final comment, which was actually in a separate January 5th letter, they had requested fluorine testing, and fluorine is a test which, if fluorine is present, it indicates that PFAS is present. This is kind of a testing element. So in addition to the other tests that the Conservation Commission already requires, the Watershed Association is requesting a test for total organic fluorine or total fluorine, kind of as a indicator of the presence of PFAS. So we also commented on the comments from Attorney Ann Giroux. The first comment that was made had to do with the dark skies compliance. And it is our opinion that dark skies compliance is beneficial in terms of having a lighting system that is energy efficient and is not, doesn't have higher levels of illumination than is required. And the only issue here, I believe, and a part of the certification process that Gale Associates is applying for, part of that process relates to the cutoff time for the lights. So again, that's the 8:30, 9:30 issue that we suggested might be discussed with the school department. There was also a comment about light trespass across property lines and light trespass into the wetlands, which was also a concern to the Conservation Commission. So we did take a look at the photometric plans, and there is some light trespass right behind the home bleachers. When it gets to the property line, the illumination level is about 0.6 of a foot candle. That drops off to 0 in about 25 additional feet. The illumination level that is greater than 0 is about 50 feet from the nearest residence on Longmeadow Way. With respect to the wetlands, the photometric plan indicates that they were pretty effective in cutting off the light levels right at the edge of the athletic field. There's not much extension into the wetlands at all in terms of the lighting levels. So that responded to the concerns about light trespass, both in terms of the neighbors and the wetlands. The next comment related to noise, seeking information on the public address system that is being proposed. And we understand that Gale Associates is currently working with the school district in terms of selecting a particular model or manufacturer of the public address system. So that's kind of an open item in terms of providing the detail that was requested about the system. Comment here on the tennis pickleball courts. And the comment was again requesting shielding or a noise barrier effect, specifically stating the suggestion was mass-loaded vinyl sound mitigation material on the two sides of the tennis court that face most directly Longmeadow Way. We had suggested actually material be placed on 3 sides to be sure that the sound is absorbed. There were also comments on the drainage and stormwater issues. There's kind of 3 elements of the stormwater system that are sort of all mentioned in this first comment under stormwater. The first one, again, is an issue of total suspended solids. Again, we feel the fields aren't subject to TSS degradation. And even if there was some TSS, Gale Associates specifies the minimum flow rate through the synthetic turf as 16 inches per hour, whereas the flow rate through the underlying in situ soil is only about 1 inch per hour. So the turf is much more permeable than the underlying soil, which ultimately determine how much infiltration takes place. So again, we don't think the degradation by TSS is really an issue. The next issue related to stormwater is that of the synthetic turf fibers. Synthetic turf does shed fibers over time. What will happen to them because of the way the synthetic turf and the drainage is constructed here? The only way for water to leave the field is to flow downward. So if there are any fibers that come loose, they'll be washed downward and rest on the synthetic turf itself. Now, those fibers are fairly light. They could be displaced by wind over time. They could be displaced by athletes using the fields. So some of these loose blades of grass may find their way into the stormwater system eventually, but the primary direction for the deposition of these loose fibers is simply downward towards the turf itself. There was also a concern about microplastics, and synthetic turf is plastic, and any type of plastic is going to generate microplastics. That's not to be confused with the loose fibers, because the microplastics that are usually evaluated are as small as 100 nanometers in length. And to give an idea of how small it is, they're 100 nanometers. It takes 100,000 nanometers to be the width of a human hair. So some of these microplastics are very small. Usually the upper limit on what's considered a microplastic is about 5 millimeters in length. The blades of grass are 40 millimeters in length. So the loose blades of grass aren't the same as microplastic. Because the turf is plastic, there is going to be some microplastic added to the runoff, which again will be directed towards the ground. It'll become part of groundwater. Any plastic anywhere generates microplastics, as does the synthetic turf. There was another issue raised, which was that the issue of stormwater trespass. And the issue raised was that the runoff from the site is going to contain contaminants, which would enter onto adjacent property. And the thought was that therefore an easement is necessary to authorize this underground infiltrated storm runoff to leave the property. Well, I don't know of a case where contaminated water was considered to require an easement. Usually issues of stormwater trespass are surface water issues, and they occur when there's an increase in the volume or peak rate of stormwater runoff, or stormwater runoff is collected in a pipe in a point source, and the increase of the point source is right near a property line. So it's a physical above-ground water that relates to peak rates of discharge, not subsurface infiltrated runoff that contains certain contaminant levels. The general direction, though, of the underground infiltrated stormwater is sort of towards the wetland that's in the center of the site. It'd be flowing north from the football field and south from the softball field. So the contaminated water would most likely stay on the school grounds for quite a distance before eventually making its way towards the Miles River wetland and the watercourse itself. One issue I did want to mention in terms of underground water and any contaminants, there was testimony given at the last public hearing that there were private wells along Long Meadow Way. And I suggested the board may want to get information from the Board of Health. I don't see that there's an imminent health threat here. Again, there's PFAS and there's microplastics everywhere. But if there are private wells here, maybe the Board of Health might have an opinion as to whether there should be some reaching out to those property owners and perhaps asking if they might want to go on town water. And there could be a discussion of how all that works financially. But I don't think it's an imminent threat, but you know, it is an issue if there are private wells there. And I think maybe discussing those issues with the Board of Health are probably the best way to handle it. So there were various statements made here that artificial turf should be prohibited, and there are various sources documented that support that position. We did not attempt to evaluate them, but just noted that there is documentation provided. I know there were different views on that. There was also a comment made about whether or not natural turf fields could be used in lieu of the synthetic turf fields in terms of hours of use and that type of thing. There were examples cited of natural turf fields that might get more use than the fields here. We did not evaluate that other than to say that, again, there were sources provided for the statements about the extent of use which is possible from natural turf fields. I know Gale Associates and people in the school department have a different view of whether or not that's practicable. So there were additional comments made here about if artificial turf is permitted, and I think the fundamental point was that if artificial turf is permitted, there should be testing for contaminants. We would agree with that. The infill material was another comment, that it should be organic. I think an organic infill material has a lower potential for many types of contaminants. I know Gale Associates has said that the school district is considering specifying a non-tire-based infill. There was a recommendation that the school district develop a temperature-based testing and use policy. Synthetic turf does get hot in full sun conditions, more so than a natural turf field. So it does seem reasonable that the school district does develop a method for measuring the temperature and also a policy in terms of if it becomes too hot for the fields to be used in a full sun condition. There was a comment about a GMAX rating, which is a rating for the impact that the artificial turf provides. Gale Associates does specify actually a GMAX rating which is lower than industry standards. So I think everybody agrees that's a valid issue, and the spec Gale Associates has is more conservative or lower than the industry standards. So those are our comments on the comments that Attorney Giroux made, our comments on the noise issue, and our comments on the Ipswich Watershed Association comments. So sorry this was a bit lengthy, but I did want to go over everything in detail and be pleased to respond to any questions.
Do members of the board have any questions for Mr. Houston at this time?
I have one question, Mr. Houston, on the discussion around, I guess it was brought up by Ms. Giroux that for what she referred to as an average field of 80,000 square feet, and actually the three fields in Hamilton will be more like 258,000 square feet, so it's quite a bit larger. But she had cited the amount of shredded material, plastic coming off that would amount to, let's get our number here.
I think you said
Would amount to 200 to
it's a wide
3,200
range,
pounds.
200 to 3,200 pounds.
But with the 258,000 feet, the plastic would amount to 129,000 pounds of plastic on the fields. And that would yield, at the same percentages she was citing, 600 to 10,000 pounds per year. The question is, because I think are there really two issues here? Because the infiltration, because what you said was the fabric would essentially filter any of the plastic from going downward. So infiltration's not the real issue there, but migration would be an issue, not only of the microplastic, but also of the infill. That has to go somewhere, and I think you mentioned it could get blown by the wind. It could, it could be maybe washed over in a heavy storm, washed off the field, off the surface, toward, as you said, downhill, going toward the wetlands area. So I think the two issues, I think, are they being conflated with each other, or are they really separate issues here? And what happens to the 600 to 10,000 pounds of microplastic, if these numbers are correct? What happens to it over the course of a year? What's the disposition of the plastic?
Well, I'm not really sure that's been studied, because the one mechanism to remove the blades that are shed is stormwater. But in this case, the only method for stormwater to leave these synthetic turf fields is downward. Even under major storms where there's a discharge of stormwater into the wetlands, it first goes through the artificial turf, through the gravel underneath it, and it's collected in drains that then discharge under extreme storms. So any water that ever falls on these fields, it goes downward. So the initial displacement by stormwater is to kind of leave it in place. The blades themselves are fairly light, so they may become embedded in the turf itself, or some of them could be displaced by the wind. They could be displaced simply by sticking to the shoes of athletes or being tracked off. So there's not a clear path that I have been able to identify as to how this material would be ultimately removed from the, as I say, some of it may simply stay in place, but there are two mechanisms I can see where it would be moved. One of them would be wind, and the other would be use by the athletes who could track it off the field.
Thank you.
I had a question for Mr. Houston. You've talked pretty extensively about light trespass and the dark sky standards. Actually, Emil previously had brought up the consideration of glare as separate from light trespass, and it seems a little difficult to discern from the cut sheets on the luminaires whether there will be shielding from glare. And considering that the light poles are fairly high, that cutoff angle seems fairly critical for the abutters. So I just wondered if there's some more information we could have on the luminaires and the cutoff angle relative to the height of the poles.
Well, in terms of dark skies, the concern is upward projection of light, and the fixture information that they've provided indicates that the upward projection of light is totally cut off. In terms of glare, I'm sure that if you're on the school campus or on adjacent properties, you'll be able to tell when the lights are on or off. There's just going to be sort of a glow. The point sources of light visible from adjacent property, that's a difficult question to answer because the cutoff angle on the fixtures appears to be horizontal. So the question would be, can you look up and see any sort of point source of light from off the property?
That's exactly my question.
Yeah, the nearest light poles are about 100 feet or so from the property line. The farther light poles are like 300 feet away, and they vary a bit in height, but they're 80 and up to 90 feet. So, it is possible that you can see sort of up under the light fixture to see like a point source of light there. There was an effective computer rendering that was provided that shows how effective these lights are in terms of directing light downward. It's very good. But again, with the geometry of the height of the fixtures and the proximity of the property, can I guarantee you that you absolutely can't see a point source of light? No, I can't.
So I guess from the neighbor's point of view, would it be appropriate? Would it be worth exploring whether there could be some sort of an augmented shield or something like that doesn't in any way interfere with its effectiveness on the field for sports, but it eliminates or reduces the visibility of the point source?
I'm sure that something could be specified there because cutoff capacity in exterior lighting fixtures is a universal concern. There's always a desire to protect adjacent properties from any sort of point source of light. So if there is the possibility that a point source can be seen from off-site, I would trust that either the fixture specified or a comparable fixture could provide a cutoff element that would help to shield that. I'm sure it's within the currently available source of light fixtures.
Thank you.
Mr. Houston, I had some questions about your recommendations with respect to the potential redesign if the test pits don't behave as anticipated. So with respect to a potential redesign, who will, well, number one, who will oversee the test pit data to ascertain whether redesign is necessary? And then if such a redesign is submitted, will you be the person who reviews it so that it's properly constructed?
We included in our recommendations some general requirements for doing the test pits. They had to be 10 feet deep, that they had to be done under the direction of a mass certified soil evaluator, that they observe models as well as direct inflow of groundwater, et cetera. So I think we had outlined very briefly what the requirements are for the test pits, but the requirements for test pits are known to any civil engineer. When you say test pit, it's kind of a known entity, what you're asking somebody to do. The person to determine consistency would be the professional engineer that's working for Gale Associates. She knows that the design of all the facilities are based on an infiltration rate of 1.02 inches per hour, which is sandy loam. So if the test pits come up with a soil type like a clay, which has a lower infiltration rate than sandy loam, she will know enough that the system has to be redesigned. Similarly, the models and the direct observation of groundwater will determine where seasonal high groundwater is. And the professional engineer knows that the bottom of these systems has to be a minimum of 2 feet above seasonal high groundwater. So the test pit will be taken by a professional soil evaluator who will know how to do it. The professional engineer for Gale Associates, when she looks at the data, will know whether or not it has to be redesigned. The only problem you might run into is if you got a large area of highly impermeable soil, or you had unexpectedly high groundwater, in which case the performance of the redesigned facility might not be what we anticipate based upon the assumptions that the current design is based upon. So it might not work quite as well in terms of how quickly the water goes in the ground or providing the separation to seasonal high groundwater. You don't know that till you take the test.
Well, I guess my
There's
question...
no reason to think it's going to be bad, but
Right.
it's
My
pretty
que-
consistent.
My
Oh, yeah.
question really is, if this testing occurs right when construction begins, there won't be much of an incentive to really push the envelope and redesign this because it'll slow up the project. And so without the requisite oversight, being a little suspicious by nature, I tend to think that step of redesigning absent some oversight, might be ignored. And
Well,
how
I
would
think
we-
that could be addressed by a condition of approval, which says that the engineer of record shall submit a letter to the planning board stating that the soil tests are consistent with the basis of design of the submitted drawings. If there's any deviation, she would have to note that in the letter.
Okay,
I mean, the letter'd be written in the vernacular, you'd know whether or not it had to be redesigned. And if it does, we could take a look at the redesign, or you could get another professional engineer to peer review the thing and look at the redesign. It's fairly straightforward, I believe.
right. Well, Ms. Hervel, did you want to make any comments at this point?
Yes, I'd like to. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there.
Oops.
Did we lose?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now we can.
No, we can. Sorry about that. I thought I hit it. Again, thank you. Again, I apologize for not being there in person this evening, but I just want to touch on a few things. I know I appreciate Mr. Houston going through everything that he has, and his understanding seems to be pretty consistent with ours. I guess in regards to this redesign with the field, the only thing I would like to mention is we do have borings in some of those areas that were used as well in our evaluation, but we do plan to do the test pits to confirm that as directed. In regards to the light glare, I just want you to know that Musco's been doing these lights for 30 years, and they've done nothing but advance their fixtures, their shielding, which we provided information on. I think we also provided kind of how the lights went through the ages, how, from a distance, what you see, what you don't see. They, work very hard. The reason the light poles go higher is so that the lights do shine directly down on the field and not off the properties and not where people are going to see it in their windows. Old lighting used to shine across the fields. I think I had gone through that a little bit at one of our hearings back. So I just wanted to reiterate that there is a shield on these lights. Their focus is to not impact the abutters. That's their goal. They know that this is what they need to do to keep people from being impacted. Regarding the blades and such, it's hard. Some of the studies that are referenced are older. We just want to reiterate that these are turf products have gone through many generations, and we're on what we call number 5. And people are well aware, we are well aware that, people are concerned of the blades and such. We see limited blades now that come off the turf in this day and age. They've just advanced the technologies and, how these facilities are made. Yes, back when there was some old turf called AstroTurf that basically, was brittle and did break, and you did get a lot of blades. But I'd just like to reiterate that, the turf every day, the technology, everything is better to prevent and limit these issues. The only other thing that I'd like to mention too is regard to the PFAS testing. I know we've referenced some, future regulations that are coming and such. It's hard to require a test that's not necessarily an established method as of yet per the regulators, being Mass DEP or EPA, which is why we specify what we do in accordance with the current EPA Mass regulations, because some of the methodologies other than the water quality limits, that's all that we have right now, and that's what we work with. Again, just to stress that doing additional testing, there's not an approved methodology out there for this additional testing at this time. And I just want to make sure I got everything else. yes, we are working with the school on the PA system and where we think, speakers, things like that can be positioned as to minimize impacts to the abutters. And I think that kind of covers what I feel I would like to address. I know we did provide input to, the stormwater. I think we've addressed most of that. Like I said, I think the one item is the PFAS testing, and also, the schedule. That's going to be purely between, the school districts and yourselves on the hours and such. And we'll, take the directive as that goes. And I think that's it. Pretty much we've addressed, and, Tom's pretty much concurred with, our responses.
Thank you, Ms. Herval. I think
Thank
that
you.
it might be helpful just to then review some of the outstanding items. And I just noted a few for myself, and I know that other planning board members may have additional items that they feel still needs to be addressed at the next meeting that we have. I think that the wells are an issue, and I don't know how to go about ascertaining who along Long Meadow or what abutters do have wells. If Patrick were here, he might have some information on that. I would imagine that the Board of Health would also have, would know which abutters have wells, but it would seem to me that the simplest thing would be to test that well for PFAS to obtain any type of baseline, and so that subsequent testing, if it was done on a regular basis, if it showed any increased levels, could point to a potential problem. And then what that solution would be would have to be discussed. But I think that is something that we should explore. So some of the outstanding items that I noticed is that the NOBIS geotechnical report that is part of your package is still in draft form.
That's being updated as we speak. We had to get some authorization to move some of that, but that is being addressed.
Right. The design of the PA system is still in process. I know that you were working on a design for the amenities building, and I don't know if that has been finalized. I believe you indicated in your transmittal of the letter from it was from the police, that you were still awaiting comments from the fire chief.
Correct.
We need to, finalize any kind of noise buffering design for the tennis pickleball courts. And certainly Mr. Houston made some suggestions in that regard. We're awaiting the operation and maintenance budget. And I did address with Mr. Houston the condition that he proposed with respect to the test pits and any potential redesign with respect to that. So those are some of the items that I had, and I don't know if any board members have any other issues that they would bring to your attention and Mr. Houston's attention so that we can work toward getting all these issues resolved.
Well, regarding the fire department and emergency, we did get a letter from the police, which I think we submitted.
Right.
We attempted to have a meeting with the fire chief at the same time, and there was some miscommunication on with the school and such, so we've been pushing to get that. He does have the plans and such, and in fact, we followed up with them the other day to try to move that ahead.
Okay.
The PA system, that's something that's really the schools needs to decide. We only provide options, or so we'll continue to follow up with them on that. The amenities building, the design, our drainage and all that is reflected on the latest site plans, the footprint and all of that. So I think that's addressed. The noise barriers, I know, and we are considering I had given a specification for the ones utilized at the tennis courts. And just waiting on approval, whether that's a go or not. The O&M budget we are working on, and the test pits.
And would measuring the temperature of the fields also be included in the maintenance operation? That was something that Mr. Houston brought up.
Keep in mind, we will have a water system. We call them a quick connect in all the fields where it's connected to the existing irrigation system that's out there. And what these do is they allow them to hook up hoses and cool off the field. Keep in mind in the Northeast that we do have a limited time of hot weather, and most of the majority of the sports are played in the spring and the fall, at least high school organized sports. But we do have a system to that, and based on our experience, the fields don't hold heat like pavement. So like if a cloud comes over, they do cool off fairly quickly to the ambient air temperature, and then watering the fields does cool it down. And our experience has been up to about 2 hours, and then they'd have to do it again if it's that hot.
Okay, unless any planning board members have any further comments, I know we have several members in the audience. I don't know if anyone would like to speak, but if you do want to make any remarks, I would ask that you go to the podium and state your name and your address. And if you're following someone who's made your point, you don't necessarily have to repeat it. So.
Hello. My name is Purnima Macris, and I live at 15 Donburn Way. I like to bring your attention to the fact of runoff from artificial turf plastics. I have a picture here with me that was posted by the East River Park Action Committee, and they basically have the artificial turf was installed in this park and opened in November 2022, and the pictures were posted in 2023, and I'd like to show you the pictures of daily runoff of plastic turf into the waterway. So I'm going to show you. What's this and what's this?
I don't think so.
And I can.
I think the best thing that you could do with respect to this is to transmit this to the planning board so that it can be added to our webpage so that the public can see this and we can study it and understand it better. But
I don't know what that is.
do you know what type of synthetic turf that is? And if it's set forth in there, it would be helpful to know that information as well. What brand, if you will?
Well, the point I want to make is that the synthetic turf technology might have changed, but in terms of shedding, it hasn't changed very much. They did post that it was manufactured by Greenfields. It's called All Sports XP50.
All Sports SP
XP50.
XP50.
And according to this report, it's a daily occurrence. I mean, like whenever the turf is used, you'll see that kind of debris. So it's incorrect to say that there's very little or no debris that's going to get transmitted into the waterways.
Okay,
so
so-
I recommend that they look at this. I'll send you the report.
Right, and we'll make sure that Mr. Houston and Ms. Hervel have an opportunity to look at that as well.
Okay. And then another report I'd like to share with you is from the Alfred Wagner Institute in Germany. they've done a very thorough study of, pollution that goes to the ocean, plastic pollution in particular. There's a whole report on that. I just like to ask, where does our stormwater get to? If someone can answer that question, where does the stormwater run off to eventually?
Well, I think that, if someone can easily correct me if I'm wrong, but that is a hydrogeological question. And I don't have the answer, and I don't know if,
I believe it runs into the Ipswich River watershed.
Right.
Eventually to the ocean.
Yes, and so we're talking about accumulating these plastics, right, in the layers of the turf, and eventually running off into the Ipswich River. So I don't understand this. Okay, but anyhow, the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany has identified, they gave a list of top 10 sources of plastic pollution in the ocean, and number 5 on that list is transport. Abrasion of particles, spots and playgrounds, abrasion from artificial turf as the 5th largest contributor of plastic pollution in the ocean. So I'd like you to read through this article.
okay, please provide that to the planning board. Patrick Reffert is away, but that is something that we can take a look at, and of course, Ms. Hervel and Mr. Houston should have an opportunity to look at it as well.
Okay, and the other issue I'd like to address is recycling. Because we know,
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Houston has his hand up. Maybe he wants to respond immediately to what you said.
Just to clarify that this whole site
Did we lose Mr. Houston?
I'm sorry, I guess I was muted, sorry. The site as a whole is in the Miles River watershed. So whatever runoff leaves the property, either as surface flow or as groundwater flow, will eventually make its way towards the Miles River. So that's the ultimate point of outflow for this whole area.
okay, another point I'd like to make about recycling is that recycling is, unfortunately, I have to, I'm sure most of you know this, recycling is a myth. And I like to read a scientific article. It was published in Resources Conservation and Recycling Journal. It's an Elsevier peer-reviewed journal. And I'd like to read to you a sentence from this. Of the estimated 44 million tons of plastic waste managed in 2019 domestically, approximately 86% was landfilled, 9% was combusted, and 5%, only 5% was recycled. Okay? So the reason why so little is recycled is because it's very hard to recycle plastic. Like when we go, we clean our plastic bottles thoroughly, right? All of us, and we put it in our recycling bin and it gets carried away. Only 5% gets recycled because plastics are very complex. There's so many different types of materials that goes into, the different plastics are made of different materials. There's polyethylene, there's polypropylene, there's polyvinyl chloride, and they have to get sorted in order to get recycled. Most of the time, a lot of these recycling companies don't have the resources because you have to look at every piece of plastic. You have to see what barcode it is, and then you have to put it into the appropriate bins. So it's not so easy to do, okay? So this is a peer-reviewed journal article, and they're telling us only 5% of plastics that we generate is being recycled. 86% ends up in landfill, okay? Look at it, an artificial turf field. You're talking about thousands of kilograms of plastics. after the 5 to 10 years of life, where does it go? It's not getting recycled. I don't know of any. We can't even recycle the plastic waste we use in our homes because less than 5% is recycled. How can you recycle an artificial turf? It's made up of so many different, there's the plastic backing, there's the turf grass. So I just want to, bring up this issue of recycling. And we have the facts here. It's a burden we place on the earth. Our use of plastics is a huge burden on the earth. It takes away land from wildlife. It pollutes our waters.
Ms., I do appreciate your concerns. I understand them. I think there are a lot of people who wish to speak, and it's the hour is getting a little late, and we have some other business. So please don't view my remarks as a criticism of what you're saying. I think your peer review articles are worth consideration, but I'd like to hear from as many other people as possible. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I promise to stick to 3 minutes or less. My name is Michelle Horgan, and I'm here to represent the Hamilton-Wenham Athletic Facilities Improvement Committee. I want to start by thanking members of the Planning Board for the time and effort you have committed to the district's application to improve its athletic facility as it pertains to your board. The board's request for a peer review has been a valuable collaborative process in moving the project forward, so thank you for that. We understand the topic of PFAS does not fall within the scope of the Planning Board. We also understand the prevalence of PFAS in the many materials we use on a daily basis in our lives. We are confident the district will leverage the learnings and decisions made from the many local communities and local institutions that have recently installed turf fields. In the spirit of continued collaboration, our group is very focused on moving this project forward at the scheduled pace as voted upon by the citizens of Hamilton and Wenham. So thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Tim Fazio. I'm at 1 Miles River Lane in Wenham. I'm the Hamilton-Wenham Little League president. I'm one of the baseball boosters at the high school, one of the softball boosters at the high school. I have 4 kids that attend our schools and play on our fields. And I'm lucky or unlucky enough to have a senior who is incredibly smart and looking at some of the top universities in the country and in our region, all of which have turf fields, by the way. Harvard, Amherst, Williams, Wellesley. I actually was just sort of site checking to make sure I was correct. And Middlebury that we visited the other sports season has a brand new opening right now turf baseball field in the heart of Vermont and environmental protection in the United States. So just thought that would be important. I submitted a letter on behalf of the Hamilton-Wenham Little League to the Planning Board. Thank you for receiving it. I am also authorized by youth soccer in town and youth football to give their endorsement to my letter and what's in there. I think lacrosse, although I'm not 100% sure because I think they're on vacation. But so everybody knows, the youth sports in town are very much behind the field project for the high school as constituted. I'm going to read my letter, and then I'll sit down for the purposes of folks who are not on the mailing list and having been able to get it. So, Planning Board, on behalf of the board of the Hamilton-Wenham Little League, please accept this letter of strong support on behalf of the Fields Project. As an organization that has invested well over $250,000 in the recreational facilities of both Hamilton and Wenham in only the past few years, Hamilton-Wenham Little League is uniquely positioned to understand the critical importance of the Fields Project to our community. Youth and middle and high school sports and recreation are part of the fabric of this community. Hamilton-Wenham Little League regularly services over 400 children each year in our league, Little League, softball, and Babe Ruth programs. We work tirelessly with other youth sports, the Hamilton Wenham Recreation Board, and the athletic department at the high school to schedule, maintain, and improve our fields without significant financial assistance from the towns or the school districts. Critically, the exuberance for youth and middle high school sports and recreation severely taxes our current grass fields, often making them unplayable, and likewise prevents the community from utilizing many recreation areas because of overuse and/or schedule conflicts. The Fields project benefits the entire community, not just the children and families who play sports, but providing much-needed improved areas that can withstand significantly more use, alleviating the strain on current grass fields, and adding other amenities like tennis courts and a revitalized track and stadium for everyone to enjoy, bringing sports and a sense of community and pride back to the middle and high school. As active and experienced coaches, we have zero safety concerns about turf fields. Our players, our own children, play on turf fields all the time and have for many, many years. Whether in almost all neighboring Cape Ann League towns, at Pingree in Hamilton, and Gordon in Wenham, throughout New England and beyond at other high schools and colleges, or any number of indoor facilities, we see absolutely no safety concerns. To the contrary, flat, well-cushioned, and well-drained turf fields minimize injuries. To that point, my son recently ripped his meniscus playing on iron rail, grass field. Makes absolutely no difference. Further, as experienced groundskeepers of the Hamilton Wenham Little League fields, we know full well the negative impact of overuse on grass, the immense cost and manpower needed to maintain grass, and the complete irrelevance of any comparison to the wants of professional athletes to play on grass fields that are used maybe 24 times a year and have the benefit of billionaire owners to maintain them. As Michelle said, we are very grateful for the work that you are all doing and for going through the process. But we want to make clear, the voters of Hamilton and Wenham approved this project. Funding has been provided. The school district has incurred significant costs. Bids are going out. Every other town board has followed their legal mandate to honor the vote of the community, only to consider issues that are properly within their purview, do their job appropriately and without any undue influence or personal motivations, and then decide to approve the project. On behalf of the entire board of the Hamilton Wenham Little League, we respectfully ask that you do the same. Thank you for your time.
Any other comments?
My name is Ann Giroux. I live at 821 Bay Road. As a threshold matter, I'd just like to address for a minute the scope of the Dover Amendment and the school district's exemption under the Dover Amendment from provisions of the zoning bylaws. The Dover Amendment says that the school district is exempt from the zoning bylaws for land and structures that are used for educational purposes. When that use goes beyond what is reasonably necessary for those educational uses, there's no longer protection under the Dover Amendment. And there are instances, and we've discussed a number of them tonight, and I'll cover them, where the use of these fields does go beyond what's protected by the Dover Amendment. So, for example, the dark sky requirements, that's something, it's kind of a no-brainer. To light up the sky is not protected by the Dover Amendment. There are reasonable things that can be done that don't interfere with the use of the fields by the school district for their educational purposes. Another example is the use of these fields by third parties. The school district has every right to let other people use the fields, even to get revenue from that use. But those uses by community groups, by other schools without any involvement by Hamilton Wenham athletes, that goes beyond the protections afforded by the Dover Amendment. And I would suggest that for those kind of uses, the lights and the sound systems not be used. I don't think that the community groups have the right to come on and say that they get to use the lighting system. There's other lighting factors that need to be considered. And one of them I've already raised in my prior comments, and that has to do with the intensity of the lights. These lights, the specs for these lights, as set forth in the specifications that Gale Associates has been provided to the planning board, say that there are dimmers on these lights, and the lights have 3 levels of intensity. Many schools require that the highest intensity level is only used for gameplay, and the lower intensities need to be used for other activities like practices or field maintenance. It doesn't interfere with the educational purposes of the school district to have a policy on the various intensity of lights and when they can be used. And that's something that can have a great impact on the abutters. To go on to another topic, I have asked for an illumination plan that shows the property boundaries and the wetlands areas. I know Mr. Houston addressed it, but we have yet to see, and the abutters have yet to see a plan that shows the extent of the light trespass on their property. I would request that that be a requirement. Going on to noise, again, going on to the scope of the Dover Amendment, there are some open items on noise. They've already been described, and I won't go through them. But we also get the issue of the use by the third parties. And I would request that third parties not get to use the sound system. With respect to storm drainage, Mr. Houston has looked at it and said that these plastic pieces of turf don't interfere with the drainage system, that they don't fill up the stone voids in the gravel layer. And what he specifically wrote is that the system therefore should not be subject to short-term failure. And those are the words he used. The Ipswich River Watershed Association was concerned, and again, a quote from its letter, was the long-term use of the drainage system. And I just think it would be helpful for Mr. Houston to comment on that issue.
Actually, to your point, to clarify what is short-term and what is long-term.
Correct. And if he believes that long-term it won't be a problem, that's great. I just think he should say that in his comments. With respect to a number of the other issues about the fields, I'll just rely on the studies that I cited in my prior comments. One of the biggest issues that I think there is the testing of the artificial turf for PFAS and other chemicals. Gale Associates is taking the position that they should only have to test for currently regulated compounds. That's approximately 6 compounds. Right now, there's somewhere between 12,000 and 15,000 PFAS. They only knew several years ago that PFAS was even in artificial turf. The science about testing for PFAS is developing quite rapidly. Right now, though, there's only testing for approximately 70 of these specific PFAS compounds. So if you take a look at the letter from Jeff Gerhardt of the Ecology Center that I provided to the planning board about 2 weeks ago, what he talks about is that the standard for artificial turf is testing for all the specific compounds as well as the total fluorine testing. And what he says is the total fluorine testing is currently the standard for firefighter gear. It's currently the standard for testing food wrapping. And he's saying that it should also be used for artificial turf. To just say that you only need to test for the 6 regulated compounds it really doesn't help us. I think the abutters and the town really deserve to know what kind of PFAS is in there so that if problems develop in the future, we have a record of what's there. And we're not only looking, we're doing more than just looking at the current 6 regulated compounds. With respect to the temperatures testing program, we heard Gale Associates say that it's really only an issue in late to midsummer. The issues that make temperature a problem are clear days when there's not much cloud cover, temperatures generally 80 or above. And that can happen even in May and June. It can certainly happen in September. And I think my concern and what no one has talked about tonight or focused on is these turf fields are going to be used for more than just the sports leagues at the high school. They're going to be used for gym classes. The softball field is going to be used for the middle school recess. So it seems to me the school district should have to show a program that when a certain temperature is reached, that testing of those is done. And who's going to do the testing? Who's going to decide whether watering is going to happen? Who's going to do the watering? Or are they just simply going to say, okay, today, no playing on these fields for recess, or no playing on the fields between 11 and 2?
Mr. Rowe, we understand, and some of this information was in your comment. So given the time, I would ask you to please expedite your remarks.
Okay, just one final point, and that is that Gale Associates talks about the recycling programs for turf, and it gives several examples of projects that it has worked on or companies that it's worked with. And it gave 4 examples. One of them is a company, Tenkate. Tenkate currently is not recycling, but instead it's incinerating the artificial turf. Shaw Sports, what it's doing is it's cutting up the good pieces of the artificial turf and using them on other smaller type projects. In Portsmouth, New Hampshire, where Gale Associates says the turf was recycled, it in fact has not been recycled, and for the past 6 months, it's just sitting on the edge of the playing field that it was removed from. I have photos of this, and I'll send these to the planning board. With respect to Medway, where it says recycling it will happen, bids have just come in. There's no contracts that have been signed, so it's not clear to me how Gale Associates can make that statement. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
If you could keep your remarks as brief as possible, and by that, I don't want to cut you off, but
Not at all.
we have some other board business that we have to attend to.
Understood. And thank you, Madam Chair and board members. My name's Andrew St. Pierre, 743 Bay Road. I'm a direct abutter to the property. I spoke at the last meeting regarding mostly my concerns about usage. I was looking for some answers to questions. And I won't say anything at all about the turf. There are people far more expert than I, and they're far more eloquent than I to speak about that. I might only remind the planning board that if the coming legislation that bans artificial turf installations in the Commonwealth happens, and this field is purchased or installed or in the process of being installed, it will be grandfathered until the end of its useful life. And then 10 years down the road, on average, we'll be back to building proper grass fields. And there's a very good likelihood that bill will pass. Anyway, I think that may also have fed a little bit of the urgency with which the board was admonished a few minutes ago. I have just a short list of questions that I would like to read into the record and ask the planning board to address to the school district, if they would, please. And I'll give you copies when I'm done, very quickly. Recently, last week, the superintendent of the school district, in his regular missive to parents, suggested in very definitive terms 2 things. One, that the planning board was dragging its feet, to put it in the colloquial, and also that an abutter or abutters was intent on stopping this project. That's just not true. I'm an abutter. I know all the abutters personally, and none of them have it as their intent to stop this project. And I rather resent that. I have to say, it's a strong word, but I resent it. And I want to know if Superintendent Tracy is willing to retract that statement and correct it, because it's not true. He has no basis to make it. And he has a bully pulpit to speak to interested parties that we don't have, I don't have, except here, nattering on in front of you, and I apologize. Second question, does the school district recognize any abutting property owners' rights? Do we have any rights at all in their view, in their minds? It would seem they don't really feel that way, but I don't know. Does the school district recognize any town authority with regard to hours of usage? Who ultimately makes this call? 4, and this was touched upon by Mr. Fazio and in his eloquent letter, and in some of the anecdotal interactions I've had with people who are involved on both sides of this, it is clear that the project was pitched, if you will, if that's not I don't mean that to be pejorative. It was endorsed to the town on the basis that there'd be wide usage, very wide usage, far beyond just high school games and practices, which means youth leagues. And is it the district's intent that these playing surfaces be used 7 days a week? Because in answer to the question of what are the projected hours and times of usage, the answer was till 8:30 at night, Sunday through Thursday, and Friday and Saturday till 9:30 at night. Mm-hmm. Right? And we're not talking, and I'm not at all concerned about a Friday night football game, a Saturday night soccer game where the lights are on, the PA's going, and the kids are playing a soccer game at the high school level or the junior high school level. But I am concerned about the fact that it's going to be impossible for the school district, who owns this land, by the way, not the town. Mm-hmm. It's going to be impossible to tell youth sports leagues, you can't have the time you want on these fields because whatever reason, they're going to be, I think the intent is they're going to be in use whenever possible 7 days a week till 8:30 or 9:30 at night. And I wonder if any of the members of the school committee or Superintendent Tracy or anybody else would like me to come park my truck 150 feet from his house every night and put the lights on and play music or speak through a megaphone every night. And I think that is the intent, but I'd like the board to ask the administration of the schools what it is that is their intent. And fifth question, there's only 2 more, does the school district define town youth sports as a school event? That was the phrase used by the superintendent when he was proposing his schedule for school events. Are these school events, if the youth league, if the little league is on that field, at 9 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night, whatever it is, are those school events? Because that leads to the next question. Does the school district intend on asserting the protections of the Dover Amendment in defining youth sports league as protected educational use? Sort of a technical question, but it begs asking. And finally, and this sort of goes to an interaction that occurred where it would appear, I don't want to point any fingers, but it appears the town council interacted with the school district with regard to a question unrelated to the Dover Amendment, but the Dover Amendment got raised by town council where it was assuring the school district they could ignore the planning board on a certain issue. So I want to know, did the school district have any interaction with town council with regard to the question of a requested toxicology report or in any other matter involving oversight by this committee? I'd like to know that because I think there's a conflict there that needs to be understood better. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But if I'm right, there's a conflict there that's a problem. So I'll leave these with you and thank you for your time. And, any and all.
Just give them to the chair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll take them, thank you.
Can you also send those via email to the planning board?
I can.
That'd be great.
Yes, that would be great, and then Patrick Leffert will have them.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm Jackie Miller. I live at 5 Long Meadow Way. I'm in a butter to the property. I didn't really plan on anything, but I did want to speak and concur with our neighbors that none of us want to hold up this project. My son went to Hamilton Wenham High, and a great experience. I want the best possible facilities. As a matter of fact, there were some problems where, later, after he left, things weren't funded, and I felt that was too bad that they lost that. So I don't want to do that. And we do want the kids to have the best facilities possible. I think that the risks outweigh the pros of putting, artificial turf is much more risky than natural grass. There are a lot of fields that are very successful, even universities that are switching over, and the pro athletes who all are in agreement that they would prefer to be on grass. I know I had a son who played on artificial turf briefly for a period of time, and he developed asthma. He left that school and no longer had asthma. At the time, I didn't really realize, didn't even understand the dangers of artificial turf, but now I know that he probably got some of the pellets in his lungs or whatever, who knows what, but he did experience that. I think a lot of the issues of artificial turf are long-term. They're not the short-term. Injuries more short-term. What the repercussions are to the human body, you may not know, and you may not even be able to determine whether it ever had to do with the artificial turf. But we all do know that PFAS are definitely considered bad for the human body. We've also in this town done a lot of work towards our environment, and I think that we've banned the plastic bags. We have some studies about how this artificial turf, what it equals to, and the number of plastic bags that we'd be actually putting in. We do know that the infill, especially even the organic and the coconut cork, floats away and it goes into our rivers. We do have a climate action resolution that was approved by both towns to get to a 2040 net zero ahead of the state of Massachusetts. The Hamilton Wenham High School and Middle School was identified in 2019 as a hotspot for climate in this town, the most major one. And now we're going to put in 5 acres or so of artificial turf, which have been claimed that do get hot. And so I think it's undermining that plan that this town is already moving forward to. So the only thing I'll say last is on the Hamilton Wenham School philosophy. We care about ourselves, other people, and our environment. Describes the human qualities we want our children to possess and that will guide our policies, programs, and behavior. I'm not sure that artificial turf meets that philosophy. And I also do know that there are head coaches at schools who actually like to bring in students who've never played on artificial turf. Some of the best athletes in the country never had that opportunity. Some of the runners in the world never ran on, nice grass or nice roads, and yet they became fantastic athletes. There's a lot that is learned on grass that is not learned on artificial turf. I'm not an expert, but there are coaches out there who are speaking to that because they have seen what the harm is to artificial turf, cancers and things like that in their athletes. Thank you.
Unless any further comments are different than what we've heard already, I would actually like to entertain a motion to continue this hearing. I really, unless it's a very new point, we do understand, I think the different positions that people have. So, Mr. Brown.
Just a quick point. Jay Butler, 78 Olcott Road. I've been attending a couple of meetings, most of the time on Zoom, just appearing. It occurs to me that the only people speaking against artificial turf are abutters. Just like to make that point. Thank you.
Hi, I'd just like to make one more comment on behalf of my daughter, who goes to the Hamilton Wenham Public School. I'm not in a butter, and I have 2, teenagers in the Hamilton Wenham Public School, And my daughter specifically asked me to, to state that she does not want to have anything to do with artificial turf. This whole plan of, replacing the natural grass fields with artificial turf is really sidelining the children. I mean, one of the things the school district makes a big deal about is being inclusive. So she feels like she's being left out, and many of her friends feel like they're being left out because they're being forced to play on plastics.
This is really beyond our purview,
Right.
so I really think we have to cut this short. I mean, we can't be all things
Is
to
there
all
anybody
people.
with questions online?
That's what I just
Yep.
asked.
Okay.
There's one that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
so. Yep.
Can you read it, or do you want me to read it? Because I don't.
I can't-
Okay, I know
I
you can't. Has anyone done a simple Google rather view of the 35,000 fields with night lighting in the country? And then there's some link to some images. And then my kids track turf from other towns 5-6 times a week. Will you be testing the soil at my house too? Have you seen turf debris? It doesn't blow in the wind by design. Your list of excuses worthless given your on-camera performance of laughing at the project the moment it was put forward. You should all be sued. Okay,
Oh, girl.
yeah. Has anyone, these are all anonymous, I'm just gonna say.
You know what?
There's no-
Excuse me, if they're anonymous, we're not going to consider them, because we don't even know if the anonymous people making these comments are from Hamilton and Wenham. So if one isn't,
All anonymous.
Can you
anonymous.
do me a favor and just,
So we're not reading anonymous.
we're not reading anonymous posts. In fact, unless someone has something absolutely different than what has already been said, I really would like to entertain a motion to continue this hearing, because it's 9 o'clock and we have other board business. We're a volunteer board, and, for us to go, long hours is it kind of difficult for board members.
I move that we continue the hearing.
I second that.
Well, I want to make sure no one has a point that hasn't been addressed. Oh, no. Sorry. Paula.
Dana Lara, 70 Echo Cove Road. I just have my question is really specifically about why are we continuing the hearing?
Because there, as I stated about 45 minutes ago, there are a number of items that have yet to be addressed. So we're continuing it because not only are there outstanding issues that Gale Associates has to provide to our peer reviewer, the planning board itself has to discuss these issues within its powers. Consider the conditions, and so we're not ready to close the public hearing.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand, though the public hearing would continue, so you would have the same people
it's
coming,
still-
so you couldn't just continue, you couldn't just get your feedback and consider it amongst yourselves. You feel like you need to continue to have
Well,
this
we
hearing.
still have additional information that Gale Associates and our peer reviewer are going to provide.
Okay.
So,
Thank you for that clarification.
yeah.
okay, so I have a motion to continue the hearing on the site plan review application and the stormwater management application that was made by Rick Mitchell, and I have a second by Bill Wheaton. So when I call your name, would you please indicate whether you assent to the continuance? Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
Rick Mitchell,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and please note we consider all your remarks, and we'll try and get this project moving along. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the status of the master plan. I'll make this quick. I was going to get into it in a little more depth, but the Master Plan Steering Committee received a draft of the master plan, and had some substantial edits to it, so we are still working on that. Turning to board business, we have 2 sets of minutes to consider. Although the December 19th, 2023 minutes are listed, the planning board already approved those minutes, and they should be posted shortly. So we have.
What date was that?
The December 23rd.
Okay, great.
They were approved on January 9th. So we have the January 9th, 2024 minutes and the January 23rd. There's a typo in there, the January 23rd,
Yes.
2024 minutes. I did go over those minutes. I forwarded the edited version of those minutes to you. So unless you found any substantial mistakes with respect to those 2 sets of minutes, that I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes, unless someone sees any problems with them.
Should we wait for Rick to come back?
Yeah, I didn't know he left.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We still have a quorum. Yeah,
Yeah,
you just vote.
Okay,
yeah.
then so moved to approve the minutes.
And-
I'll second.
Okay, so when I call your name, you can indicate your assent. Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Aye.
and Marnie Crouch, aye. And now I can entertain a motion to adjourn, and we have a quorum, so
I move that we adjourn.
do I have a
Second.
second? So when I call your name, Jonathan Poor,
Jonathan Poor, aye.
Bill Wheaton,
Bill Wheaton, aye.
Emil Dahlquist,
Emil Dahlquist, aye.
Beth Herr,
Beth, her, aye.
Marnie Crouch, aye.
So moved.
Great.